You're the PM for Facebook Lite. How would you set goals? Hey everyone, we're here today to do another Exponent mock interview. We're going to be doing a product management interview with Abed. Abed, first, can you just introduce yourself for everyone?
Hey, thank you for having me. So my name is Abed. I'm an incoming product manager at Facebook. I was actually a client of Exponent and it was really helpful for me. Before that, I was at Careem. Careem is a ride-hailing and the super app of the Middle East region. And it was acquired by Uber, I think, last year. And before that, I worked on different startups in different industries in the Middle East region.
Awesome. Well, we're super excited to have you, Abed, and it's so cool to hear that Exponent has worked well for you. For those of you watching, if you want to learn more about Exponent's courses, coaching, and community, you can go to tryexponent.com. Now, I want to jump into this Facebook PM interview. We're going to be doing an execution style interview, so it's going to be focused more on analytical type things like that. And Abed should be a pro, given that he just went through the interview process. And so the question that I'd like to ask you today, Abed, is, you're the PM for Facebook Lite. How would you set goals?
Facebook Lite. Great. So just a couple of confirmations and questions that I would like to kind of check with you. So Facebook Lite is basically the light version of Facebook, where it's catered to developing countries, people with less powerful phones, and in terms of limited connectivity, whether on the speed or the download quota. Is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly right. We use Lite to help people of all bandwidth access Facebook in the experience of
Great.
Facebook.
And I think my other question is that I'm going to set the goals for today, not assuming that I'm going back in time where Facebook launched Lite. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, we're looking forward for the goals. How would we set the goals, but not backwards?
Cool. So just give me a second to kind of articulate the mission, if that's okay.
That sounds great. And in the meantime, for those of you watching, please do like and subscribe if you like this type of content and want to see more of it. Every single like and subscribe helps us, encourages us to make sure that this content is valuable for you, and that we will make more of it. So please do share your feedback and thoughts, and even comments below if you have any questions. We try to answer every single question that's asked.
Great. So the mission for Facebook is to give the people the tools to connect and kind of bring the world closer together. And my understanding, or the way I see Facebook Lite, is at the core of that mission, because if you think about it, Facebook Lite is trying to connect the people who are kind of in slightly underprivileged circumstances. And I think Facebook being a champion for inclusivity and just ensuring that everyone is served with that service is being kind of at the core of the mission, and Facebook being true to its mission. I think it's one of the key pillars to kind of bring on board the people who are in developed countries with certain technology limitations. So that's where I feel Lite is quite important, and it's actually one of the most important things, given that that Facebook adoption kind of saturated in the developed world, in the developed countries. And if Facebook needs to grow, then it kind of needs to get more users on board. And I think those users are in those developed countries, underdeveloped countries or developing countries. So if Facebook wants to bring the next billion users, I think Lite could be one of the strategies. Different strategies could be the drone that is beaming internet, or just allowing more access to different areas. So I think that could be one of the strategies to bring more users on board.
Got it. Now, just to push back a little bit. So yes, we could have the goals of inclusivity, which I love that you started there. But at what point do we know that we're no longer providing the same Facebook experience. So I could imagine an argument being made like, hey, maybe Facebook should be, we can print the newsfeed on newspapers. And we can put the newsfeed on newspapers and we can distribute them to like all of people around the world. But I might be worried about that because it's not really providing the same experience as what Facebook is known to provide, or, you know, it's not the same thing. So how would you think about whether or not Lite falls into that category of kind of being more like a newspaper or less like the actual Facebook experience, and trading that off with inclusivity?
Great. I think that's a great question, and it's a good like exercise to think about it. The way I think about Lite is pretty much it's hoping to be the core experience of Facebook. And I think most of us, when we're using Facebook, we're using some core functionalities, maybe looking up at certain pictures or messaging people or just like updating our status. So it's still connected to the same Facebook environment. So you're not out of the Facebook environment, you're just contributing differently. So I think that's one way. The other thing for Facebook Lite, it's just probably a temporary solution. If you think about it, the world is becoming, adopting to new technologies faster. So let's say there is a country that doesn't have the support for broadband internet, but this country will get broadband internet next year. So you're kind of introducing them to the Facebook ecosystem. And then once they sort of like graduate to become eligible for the full Facebook experience, this is where they can use the normal app. So it's not a completely disconnected experience. It's just kind of, I would say, more focused on the basic needs that you would need, given the limitation of technology.
Got it. Okay. Great response. And yeah, I think it sounds like what we want to do is we want to focus on Facebook Lite as an on-ramp into the Facebook experience. And then also Facebook Lite should really represent the core experience of Facebook. And I like that point as well. And a Facebook newspaper does not quite get at the core experience of Facebook, although it could be a pretty cool idea. So we have this mission or kind of the high level objectives, but can we talk a little bit more about what specific goals that we would set for Facebook Lite and how we might go about picking those goals? And even like would love a consideration at some point in your answer about the TAM or the total addressable market that we might have here with this product.
Got it. So I think at this point, Facebook Lite has been there for years. So as a product, I would say it has reached maturity in terms of like product itself. But I think the core mission of this product is to ensure that we're really solving that problem that we said we want to solve, which is connecting the people who are like have those certain challenges. And for that, I want to measure my success as the PM in terms of the adoption rate for this app. So basically, looking at the number of people who are using the app versus the total addressable market that we have. So almost like everyone who needs the app versus how much actually we're supporting and how much we're serving in this new app.
Got it. So we're going to look at the leftover users or the users that may not have access that we should be able to access or
Yes.
provide that experience.
Yeah. So overall adoption of this Facebook Lite app.
Got it. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I guess, how would we think about, why do you think people are not using that? Or like, what is the barriers to Facebook Lite that we want to address or focus on?
Okay. So I think first of all, what's unique about Facebook and generally all of the social networks is that this network effect, where you need your friends to be on Facebook to kind of like be motivated to be on Facebook. So it's more or less like a snowball effect, where you want to really advocate certain cities who just maybe recently came online or recently started to get more people connected to the internet or with certain devices. So I think one of the things we want to look at is try to get more users onboarded on this app. I'm not sure. Maybe it's an education challenge of people not knowing about Facebook. But I think most of us back when Facebook launched, we knew about it through friends. So once your friends are there, you'll be there. And it's just like allowing access for people who might not have this like powerful smartphone, etc. So the way I would look at this is basically trying to onboard these people. And the way I would look at the total addressable market is looking at everyone with let's say a less powerful phone, and this data I might get from the manufacturers, like number of shipped devices, etc. And when it comes to the network and connectivity challenges, I'm gonna try to look some data from the telcos. If telco company can provide us with this data, that would give us the estimated total addressable market that we're gonna benchmark our numbers against.
Got it. So we're going to look at that to kind of get the total addressable market. It sounds like, maybe the telco, it sounds like what we're going to look at is like the bandwidth constraints on phones, given the different telcos and the data that they have or the data that we have with telcos. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And so we can kind of like understand or tap into why these users or how we can target these users. But I do want to kind of come back to the bigger question of the goals. So like, how can we, what exactly is our goal here, and how are we going to achieve that goal, or what are the action steps for that goal with regards to this sector that we're talking about?
Great, great. So I would say our goal is to ensure that our adoption is as good as it can be in terms of number of users who are using this app and we're serving in the proper way. And this goal we can define, as I mentioned, basically the number of active users, monthly active users, divided by the total addressable market. So if this number is going up, then it means that we're actually getting closer and closer to our end goal. And that's when we're talking about the goal. I think in terms of steps, talking about the product itself, I think the product has already proved that it's a good solution for many people. So it's about growing the base. And in terms of steps, as I mentioned, I believe it's basically about allowing more people to use it, and that would give us the snowball effect and the network effect that more people will come on board once their friends are on board.
Got it. So I love this like MAU over TAM metrics, the monthly active users over the total addressable market. Can you tell me like what's a downside of that approach or that goal? Basically, like if we just focused on that goal, is there something that you might be worried about or a trade-off that we need to consider?
So I think one thing, going back to as you mentioned, the newspaper and what kind of solutions that we want to bring, we shouldn't think about the Facebook Lite in vacuum. It's actually quite connected to the normal app, and I think it's allowed to install Facebook Lite and the normal app in different countries. So I think one downside of just looking at MAU is that basically it's mixed between the people who are actually part of the TAM, people who are on less powerful phones or connection limitations, with the people who are not part of that group. So maybe an iPhone 11 user would download Facebook Lite. Maybe someone with a powerful Android phone or with good connection would download Facebook Lite, and that could skew our numbers in terms of monthly active users. So we need to figure out a way to kind of like remove that noise and focus on the actual daily monthly active users that we care about, that kind of like they fit with our TAM.
Got it. Yeah, that's a great point. I think like the considering all the users that might interact with the product is really important here. So that's great. So it sounds like, just to repeat us again, so we're kind of like ensuring that adoption is as good as it can be for Facebook, and we've considered some trade-offs. We've considered the metrics that we want to look at or evaluate. I think one question that I do have is like, it sounds like we're going to partner with telcos and kind of understand that. Um, do you think the main approach here, it sounds like there's maybe two approaches. I'd love to hear which one you think is better. One approach is we can really improve the product experience for Facebook Lite, maybe make it more rich, make it more powerful, things like that. And we could add more features into it that are low bandwidth. For example, let's say that we don't have as good animations. Maybe we can make the animations better for Lite users. The other path we can go down is that we can really just try to make Facebook Lite itself a lower bandwidth product. So we can take, let's say it takes some number of megabits per second to download or to use, we can reduce that even further. How would you consider these two approaches when thinking about Facebook Lite? Because both seem to fit into the idea of expanding access and assuring adoption is as good as it can be. One, making the product so excellent that people are talking about it and sharing it with their friends. Another, making the bandwidth so low, or the constraints not a problem anymore, so that users can access it more readily. So how would you think about these two paths for the product?
I think given the situation that we're here now and today's situation, the product is mature, and I think a lot of brilliant PMs have worked on it and kind of like really understood what the users care about, users who fit in this persona with those limitations and those opportunities. So what I believe is that there is a product market fit for those people. It's just about scaling the product into people who are probably either not aware or people with even different limitations. So we might assume that the limitation is that you need 1 megabit connection. Maybe there are people who are left out at 128 kilobyte per second. So maybe on the product innovation side, we need to understand first if we really need to go and optimize more to capture a bigger market. My hypothesis for now, I think that is not the case. I think it has been optimized and there is a good product market fit. When it comes to how can we make this product a greater success, it is about how to scale the product in the hand of users. Basically, trying to understand what cities have not yet developed this network effect of Facebook, and how can we tap into these communities. But if from a feature perspective, I think the features are quite a good representation of what a typical Facebook user would use. And it's really a great thing to see. It's not about what you add, it's not about what you cannot remove. So I think Facebook Lite has reached that fine line between those things.
Awesome. Abed, I want to ask one last question before we kind of jump to feedback and all that kind of stuff. So I want to take us, so we're at a very high level talking about goals. I want to take us to zoom in on a certain city. Let's say that we've partnered with the telcos, we've discovered that there's a city that does not have Facebook Lite in majority of usage, maybe 1% of the users use Facebook Lite. And this city, let's just call it Cityville or something. So Cityville has 1% of users that use Facebook Lite. Majority of the users in that city do have bandwidth constraints. How would you think about going about expanding into that region, or allowing more user adoption? You don't necessarily have to say what specifically you'll do, but just what questions would you ask, and how would you think about that? Because it seems like that's part of the core strategy here. But I'd love to hear maybe a concrete steps that you might take to think about Cityville and how it plays into the Facebook ecosystem.
Got it. And I think being from the Middle East, I think some cities I've seen some strategies done by Facebook on this thing. And I think that's more or less like a universal strategy that can be tailored to regions. So I think I've seen two strategies that I think they are brilliant, and I would definitely do them as well. One is partnering up with manufacturers of phones. So basically you have Facebook Lite pre-installed. I think that removes a lot of the friction and it makes discoverability a lot easier. So you buy a new phone and then you have Facebook Lite already installed. So that's a lot easier from going and downloading and figuring it out. The other thing is a partnership with local telcos. So I've seen this in different cities and in different areas where basically telcos would tell you that if you use Facebook Lite, then it won't be calculated against your overall internet quota. So that gives you another motivation, and that's like advertisement plus motivation to actually go and explore Facebook Lite and use that and engage more with the app. The more you engage, I think pretty much you'll have more friends who are trying to get on board as well. And that's a win-win for telcos, and that's for Facebook as well.
Got it. That's great. Yeah. It sounds like the partnerships are really key there with the manufacturers and the telcos, and that might be part of your strategy when you actually kind of implement this goal. Okay, Abed, is there anything else that you think would be important to share about this interview question before we move on to feedback and talk a little bit about how it went?
Yeah, I think there is one point that I wanted to also mention that I wrote down, and that is the overall trade-off and the basically the example that I mentioned where someone with a powerful phone might install this Facebook Lite. I think that's something that that could potentially pose a threat here in terms of like cannibalization. So we might have people migrating from the normal Facebook app to Facebook Lite, and that could signal a problem that we need to measure first, and then ideally we want to understand what's driving that behavior if that happens. So if we over sell Facebook Lite, maybe more people will actually start using it. That wouldn't have the ultimate Facebook experience, A. B, it might have less I don't know, maybe like advertising potential or monetization potential. So it's really a very sensitive thing that like I, as the PM of Facebook Lite, need to figure out with the rest of the company, with the rest of the PMs on the normal Facebook app, to figure out what's our strategy in terms of like, do we go full in on Facebook Lite? How do we handle those situations where you have someone who's on Facebook Lite and you want to push them to normal Facebook app? So I think there is a lot of trade-offs that we need to make here, and to ensure that the overall LTV or the overall experience for our customers it's at its best.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it sounds like you might be watching that metric as the expansion occurs. Like as you bring more users on, you might be watching that LTV metric, or you might be watching to see the experience of the different sets of users to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, Abed, thanks so much for doing this interview. We can kind of take the interviewer hat off, and I want to just first off hear from you in your own words, like how do you think that went? A little bit of self-reflection on the interview, and then I can share my feedback as well. And again, for those watching, do please like and subscribe if you thought that this video was helpful or valuable to you.
It was an amazing conversation, and I think it went really smooth. However, I wish as an interviewee I had more structure to kind of like anticipate the questions that you will raise and address them in my answers. This way I sound more prepared and kind of like thought through. One thing that I felt I didn't do a lot is that I did not pause and really think strategically about the questions. I was maybe a little bit too excited to hear this problem because I feel it's a relevant problem for me. And then I was giving answers very quickly. I think one advice is to slow down and take notes and structure my answers in a proper way.
Got it. I mean, all great points. And yeah, I think pausing is one of the things that feels so unnatural, but it's so important for interviews. And I tell everyone that you can totally pause. It's okay to pause, and it's not a problem. So I wanted to run through some of the notes that I wrote down that I thought were really effective about what you did. You started with the mission. It was really fantastic the way you started. You were saying like, Facebook is about inclusivity, and that's why this is part of our product experience. And now we're going to bubble down to here. And I even asked you kind of a tough follow-up about the newspaper stuff, and I think you handled that really well. I will say, like at some points in the middle, I started to get lost in terms of the structure, or in terms of like what exactly is the goal, or what exactly is your justification for that goal. and are there multiple goals or are there not multiple goals? And it just helps to kind of set up front and say like, hey, this is my goal. This is the one goal that I think we should focus on. Or these are the two goals that I think we should focus on, things like that. And then I think you also did a really good job of kind of like talking through all the different experiences and experiences that you had. So I thought there was, towards the end, we had a really great example of like, hey, from where I'm from, like this is some things that I've seen that were effective. And I thought it was helpful to bring in that knowledge and bring that expertise and show that you are thoughtful about products. If we had more time, I would even encourage you to double down even more on that and say like, this is what I thought was effective about telcos versus manufacturers, telling me something a little more interesting or a little more in-depth that leverages your knowledge could be really, really effective. And then another tactic that I thought you did that was very effective is that you assumed that the product was mature and you used that as kind of like a justification for the product decisions that you were using. And I think that makes sense because honestly, you're going to have to pick something, and kind of like making that assumption seemed like a reasonable one given that Facebook Lite has been around for quite a while. So I thought that was a pretty effective approach as well. And I did ask a lot of follow-up questions in this one, so I do want to acknowledge both for you and for the viewers that this was more of a conversational type of interview, and these can totally happen in interviews. It's a little hard to tell. Sometimes the interviewer will give you a lot of space to talk. Sometimes the interviewer will keep kind of pushing you and pushing you around and trying to see if you can handle some of the follow-up questions. And so I think you did a really effective job keeping your calm and answering those follow-up questions and navigating through that interview. Any reactions, thoughts, or comments to what I just shared?
No, 100%. I think you're absolutely right. I think in my experience, as you mentioned, probably, in my experience, I had both types of interviews. I had the conversational interview where it felt like I'm just chatting with a friend who's like super interested in this technology, and we're just like kind of thinking about it like someone as a peer in my company. And it actually went great. And sometimes you need the structure. So it depends. And I think, both could happen.
Well, thanks everyone for watching. Thank you so much, Abid, for being on the show. Again, for those of you who want more content like this, visit tryexponent.com, and good luck on your upcoming interview.